Beyond limits. Expanding minds. Opening hearts. Connecting into oneness.
I still come back to, we have 100-year-old philosophy based on thousands-of-year-old philosophy and spirituality. And that modernizing something like that is a difficult proposition because every time you do something like that, you lose the origins of what was being said. As I go back and read Ernest Holmes over and over again, I see more and more unfolding in front of me that, now I understand that I didn't before. And I go, now how would I say that today? And so, for example, he says, well, in this book, this thing called life, which I was just reading, he was saying, so if God is troublesome for you as a word, then call it life. If life is troublesome for you as a word, call it potato. I don't care. And the whole point is that this thing called life is so powerful, but you have to know that it's all centered within you. And that's what the whole book is. And now taking that statement and bringing it forward into current time, we'd say consciousness, or, if you have a science bent, you would say the quantum field or the unified field. But I think today, right now, with everything that's happening in this country, tell me what you think about what's taken place in terms of a science of mind perspective to it.
I would probably take Ernest Holmes' thing where he talks about the collective consciousness or race consciousness. That's the consciousness of a group of people. I think what's happening now is that's what's being demonstrated. I think it's been hidden. I think it's been permission to come out. And so all of these things that have always been there are now surfacing. And so we get the opportunity to say, okay, what is the reality here? Mm-hmm. And the reality, no matter how you look at it, no matter what the experience is, it's all God. It's all God. And we get to go and say, okay, am I going to go into the human illusion of being disconnected, or am I going to unify myself into the oneness and actually create a mental atmosphere of bringing back peace into my own mind?
So let me dissect that for a second, because you talk about it's all God. A lot of people are not going to understand that specifically, because they're going to go, well, how's this evil stuff that's going on God? How is this other stuff that's happening? So how do you speak to those folks that don't understand how we can say it's all God?
Well, I go from the standpoint that when I define this thing called God, the thing itself, the quantum field, whatever it is, it's everything. It's infinite. So if it's infinite, that means there's nothing for it to compare itself to. If there's nothing for it to compare itself to, there can be no judgment. If there's no judgment, then there's no good or bad. If God is infinite, God cannot die. If God cannot die, then what we label as horrific is only a human perspective. But the essence of who we are is an individualization of God, children of God, points of consciousness. That aspect of us never dies.
But if we're all God, then the human part of us is God.
Yes.
And if the human part of us is God and everything is God, all we're doing is talking in circles, are we not?
Yes, we are.
So it leaves us where?
I come back to the aspect that everything is contrast for us to have a greater experience and to develop a greater awareness of our truth. And we do that individually differently. No two people are establishing a level of awareness in the same way at the same time. So as we look at what's transpiring in the world right now, between COVID, between what's happening in our government in Washington, D.C. and in states around the thing, we all get to look at that contrast. And what is our awareness doing? Are we seeing a bigger picture, or are we zeroing in really small? I think the smaller we look at it, the more pain, the more anxiety, the more stress we feel. The bigger our picture, we say, oh, the darkness is being revealed so that we can put the light on it. And when we put the light on it, we can heal.
That's good. I remember Bucky Fuller used to say that if you're standing on the moon looking at the globe, how many Republicans and Democrats do you see?
That's great.
Isn't it?
That's
It's
great.
like, okay, what's your perspective? As you were just saying, your perspective is too limited. Then what you're really living out of is your own belief system showing up out in the world, your own value systems showing up out in the world. It's very, very hard, and I know from my own experience, to come back to it's me, my belief systems, and all that I have learned in my experiences in life that is simply showing itself out there. And if I just pay attention and get the judgment off of it, I can go, oh, that's my learning experience to prove there's an essence to me that is more than I ever believed there was. So with these limited beliefs that I have to keep challenging these beliefs in order for me to rise beyond the local ego or the localized ego in its sense. And there's such a small percentage of the world that is actually doing any of that kind of thing right now.
And you brought up a word, you said judgment, when I can get out of my judgment. That is critical to all this because that's what takes us so deeply into the condition instead of being the observer role. Mm-hmm. And in human form with ego, you can't stay out of judgment. It's going to come back in no matter what you do. But if you're feeling bad, if the people listening, if you're feeling bad, know that that's your judgment. Mm-hmm. Your emotions are telling you where you're putting your focus. And that's the great thing about emotions. They're our guide. They tell us, are we focusing on desire, focusing on what we don't desire? And I try as hard as I can not to get caught up in the drama. Mm-hmm. I do my best. And so people ask me, what do you think about this? I said, there's so much that I don't know. I'm trying to see the full spectrum. I'm to see the picture, not from what the media is painting, not from what a politician's painting, but what is the other side of the coin, because what we do know that life is always in balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think about it, the issue around the human ego is the main stopping point for our own recognition of what's going on. And in the Eastern philosophy where they talk about, and every religion has its own way of talking about the very same things, it's only because in recent times I've become aware of awareness that I have found that when they talk about the veil is the misunderstanding that awareness itself is the thing that is interpreting or not interpreting. This is difficult in words. It's the thing that's having the experience, if you will. The experience is here, out here. Your reaction to it and everything that's going on is out here. But it always comes back to the only thing that is completely subjective to the objective world. Subjective being my awareness. Everything I can perceive, I'm not. So I'm saying awareness is subjective, and everything else, including my feelings, my sensations, my memories, my associations, objective out there to awareness. Therefore, if I'm looking beyond all of those to keep coming back to where is the source of who I am, because everything out there is really bringing me to that place.
Yeah.
And that's where the traditional religions in many cases miss, because they're so wrapped up in their ceremonial and ritual things and their old language that it outdates itself and people don't understand it anymore, and they get literal in their interpretation of what it means, and they lose what every great metaphysician and every great saint has said, and that is the essence of who you are is God itself.
And Larry, that's difficult for us as humans to get into, to understand when we're in the midst of all the drama. And especially today when we have a media that is bombarding us with stuff and it's slanted stuff. All the different medias have got different perspectives of what's going on. And you go, what's happening here? And you realize through each of these things, it's a piece of illusion. It's a piece of illusion. It's a piece of illusion. And then you got to sort of step back and say, wait a second, what is the truth here? Well, this is objective. This is objective. How do I get my perception out of this so I can see the whole picture?
Yeah, isn't it interesting? Because if you were to go back 150 years when we were pretty much an agrarian country, when you were out there, you didn't get information on a by second basis. You got it maybe weekly. Or like when Lincoln was around, it took weeks for the the newspapers to put out what they thought. Now, if somebody had a telegraph in town, they might have gotten it faster than that. But here we are, we get it instantly on all kinds of devices. And we're shattering our own mind because it doesn't know what to do with all of this stuff. And so the frustration, I can only imagine the amount of frustration we have when all the stuff that happens outside is in contrast to what it is we believe.
Yeah.
What an eruption.
Yeah, you know,
And
Larry.
it showed itself in Washington, D.C. just recently.
Yeah. And you know, let me take you back. This is something that really blew my mind, and I'm going back to World War II. At the beginning of World War II, Nazi Germany invaded Poland. And I'm half Polish, so that was interesting to me. And they just went in and they just wiped them out. They took over. It was a matter of days, and Poland was done. And I asked the question, why did they pick Poland? Why did they do that? And then after years, things started to come out. And what I learned was that after World War I, Germany was divided and Poland got a piece of Germany. And what was happening to the Germans that Poland was controlling is there was mass genocide going on, the Polish people to the Germans. Hitler finds that out and says, well, you're not doing that to my people. So he comes in, wipes them out. And so you say, so there was balance, wasn't there? But you see, it depends on whose perspective you were looking at it through, whether what was right and what was wrong. The Poles were saying, I'm right. The Germans are now saying, I'm right. And then, which side did you choose to balance on? Now, I'm not defending Hitler. Don't get me wrong on that. I'm just saying,
Right.
This is an interesting point of history because, remember, history is always written through the point of view of the winner, other than the Bible.
Right. Well, and the other thing is, from point of view, expand the point of view to consciousness. The infinite has no understanding or knowledge or knowing or ever anything about that which is finite.
Yeah.
In order for it to know anything about the finite, it has to become finite, which no longer means it's infinite. And so in the finite that we are, this is where the confusion comes in. We're in the finite world. We're in the finite universe. And in a finite universe, we don't even understand what infinite means. We have no For example, something that I think that blows everybody's mind is the number of cells that we have in our body is 7 times 10 to the 21st power. That's the number of cells we have. Now, if we take each cell and measure the electrical current of the cell, each cell has 1.5 volts. 3 cells in our body would recharge your telephone. And we have 7 times 10 to the 21st power cells in our body. That means we have more than 1 trillion volts of power in our body. Richard Feynman, who is a physicist, famous physicist, said in 1 cubic meter of empty space is enough power to destroy the universe itself.
That's
What?
Yeah.
Staggering. Yeah. So when we talk about infinite, everything is in degree. If we go from Washington, D.C. to my local mind, there's that piece. If we go from Washington, D.C. to the world, there's that piece. Or to the universe, it's a huge piece. In fact, nobody would even know if the entire population of the world was extinct.
That's right.
How would they know? They wouldn't. So everything is a matter of degree of what comes into our mind and how we process it. And again, it depends upon the ego basis of what we know, what we've heard, what we've experienced, what our beliefs would, so on and so forth. And I always love to do a meditation. And the meditation is if you were to close your eyes and you were to take a deep breath, and I say, who are you without your thoughts, feelings, emotions, sensations, your associations, your memories? Who are you? And the interesting part is in a meditation, you come to the realization there's nothing there. And nothing is consciousness.
So the ego just goes crazy on that. The ego says, what about me?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the tough part, because the tough part in spirituality, as everybody knows, is when you sit down to meditate, the mind wants to go all kinds of places. Well, when you challenge it on who it is and say, hey, there's the truth of who I am, is the awareness that goes, bullshit, let me tell you who you really are. You know, you're all these experiences you had, and remember when your dad hit you, or remember when your mother was taking you to school and patted you on the head and you were embarrassed, or whatever the heck it is, it's going to give that back to you and say, you're not that. You're this. And that's the challenge in classes, as you've probably experienced, is people have very few tools to get beyond their own ego. And so when we introduce them to some of the tools like spiritual mind treatment, it's like, what? I can do that? Yeah.
And you know, Larry, this week I started community gatherings. So I've had 5 gatherings this week. I've had a gathering with European people. I've had a gathering with people on the East Coast, a gathering of people in Texas, a gathering of people on the West Coast, and a gathering of men. And in each of those gatherings, I asked each of the people, there were over 60 people involved, I asked them, what was your stress level? 1 to 10. And then I said, what is the one thing that you are struggling with the most? And the number one answer came out to be connection. Connection to others. And after we get done, at the end, I said, is it connection to others? Or is it connection to yourself? And it was real interesting as we listened to each other and we explored each other. And I said to them, I said to each of the gatherings, I said, I believe that 2021 will give us more contrast than we experienced in 2020. I believe it is a year that we're going to have to learn resiliency. And we're going to have to also reinvent ourselves, because things will never go back to the way they were. And in order to do that, I said, you've got to develop a connection to yourself. And I suggested to everyone that has to start with a daily meditation practice.
Yeah, exactly. I was reading in the book this thing called Life, Ernest Holmes' book, which will appear to people backwards, but it says this thing called life. And one of the statements that he makes in here is the key to our whole understanding of life lies in the realization that life, capital L, life itself, is pure spirit in an ocean of unmanifest being whose nature it is to take a form. When the Bible states that the Word of God moves upon the face of the deep and produces creation, it means that the divine spirit speaks itself into existence by the power of its word. When the Bible states that the man is made in the image and likeness of God, it is telling us that each one of us, as an individual, reproduces the creative imagination and energy of the divine. That, although it's a little cryptic to some people, that statement is simply saying consciousness is the creative factor. And when we realize we're consciousness, we come into alignment with it, then we have control of our own destiny, because our destiny is infinite.
That's right.
So I love taking some of the old work, even as Ernest did with the Bible and with Emerson and with Troward and others, and re-emphasizing it in more modern language. In my case, more science language, because science and spirituality are coming together. But we need to be able to get the message out more and more that each one of us has the power to find the truth of who we are, and that there are tools to do that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be through long-term meditation.
That's right.
I subscribe to the direct path, which is you can find who you are directly without anything or anybody. Now, people go, oh, so I don't have to worry about my karma and I don't have to worry about all that other stuff in my mind and think. No, because either you're going to do it before the realization or you're going to do it after. So there's no getting around that part of it. But if I can do it after, where I realize who I truly am, it's a different kind of experience.
So Larry, take a moment and really describe for our audience, what do you mean when you do it? What is it before or after? How define that?
Defining it is not only being aware, it is awareness is your being. It is awareness. But it's not just as we do, which is I'm aware of the television screen. It's that the television screen is consciousness, and what's playing on it right now is the game of the world. I'm the screen. Lots of things go on in and around the screen, like watching a TV series or whatever it might be. So the thing itself is awareness itself. And awareness is, when we talk about consciousness, everything doesn't have its own conscious. So you don't have a conscious and I don't have a conscious. The consciousness is one thing, manifest through a lot of different forms. But there's only one consciousness. When we speak in science of mind and other metaphysics about there's oneness, we're not talking about form. We're talking about consciousness. There's only one consciousness. So, and that's the thing itself. Awareness is as close to that moment that you become the infinite as you get. As in Amma, the hugging saint, is fully grounded in and beyond that state of awareness. And that state of awareness, as she has shown, knows all the conversations that are going on, all the events that are happening on the earth at any moment in time that you ask her, she knows it. So you don't have to ask her anything, because the answer to the question is answered before you ask.
And my number one value in life, my number one value is to become more aware.
Yes.
And I realize that will be an infinite journey. Because how can I become aware of the infinite in a finite period of time?
Right. You can become the infinite, which means you won't be finite anymore.
My camera just went battery dead.
Yeah, it just died out, it says. Okay, maybe we ought to wrap this up and pick it up next week. I think the infinite blew out our camera.
It was too much.
All right, buddy. I'll catch up with you later.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Beyond Limits. Join us and ask your questions. Check our website for details on our call-in shows. Check BeyondLimitsRadio.com. That's BeyondLimitsRadio.com.